From UFC glory to global infamy, Conor McGregor has fought champions, scandals, and his own demons. Now, the Notorious sets his sights on Ireland's highest office, announcing a presidential run that could rewrite his legacy inside and far beyond the Octagon. Conor Anthony McGregor was born in 1988 in Crumlin, Dublin, a working-class neighborhood where toughness wasn't a choice, it was survival. His childhood was shaped by small houses, tight streets, and the sense that opportunities were limited for kids like him. Conor wasn't the polished athlete in his youth. He was restless, fiery, always looking for a way to stand out. For a while, that outlet was football. But by the age of 12, he found himself inside Crumlin Boxing Club. The gym was small and gritty, but it was there that coaches saw flashes of something rare: speed, timing, and an intensity that outpaced other kids his age. In 2013, he stormed into the UFC with a first-round knockout of Marcus Brimage. He wasn't just skilled, he was magnetic. His swagger in the post-fight interview had Dana White, and fans convinced this kid from Dublin wasn't just another fighter, he was a showman. Within 2 years, he delivered one of the most iconic knockouts in MMA history, flooring Jose Aldo in 13 seconds to win the featherweight belt. McGregor had gone from an apprentice plumber to the face of the UFC. The rise was staggering, but the higher he climbed, the darker the shadows around him grew. By 2015, McGregor was everywhere. He headlined press conferences that felt more like stand-up shows, tearing down opponents with razor-sharp trash talk. In 2016, he achieved the impossible, defeating Eddie Alvarez to become the UFC's first simultaneous two-division champion. Madison Square Garden roared, Ireland erupted, and the world knew his name. He wasn't just a fighter, he was a cultural force. But the same fire that fueled his rise soon sparked chaos. In Brooklyn, he was filmed throwing a dolly through a bus window, injuring fighters inside. In Dublin, he punched a man in a pub for refusing his whiskey. Court dates became as frequent as fight nights. Allegations of assault and misconduct hit tabloids, tarnishing the image of Ireland's hero. The headlines flipped from McGregor the champion to McGregor the criminal. And yet, paradoxically, he remained the UFC's biggest draw. Fans tuned in to watch him defend Ireland's honor, or to watch him fall. His proper number, 12 whiskey brand, became a global sensation, earning him hundreds of millions. But for every dollar earned, there was a controversy waiting to drain his credibility. McGregor was no longer just the people's fighter. He was also its cautionary tale. By the late 2010s, his aura of invincibility was fading. Khabib Nurmagomedov humbled him inside the cage. Dustin Poirier shattered him twice, and fans began asking, was this the end of McGregor the fighter? In true Conor fashion, he refused to disappear. He began shifting the narrative, speaking less like an athlete and more like a leader. To many, it felt like bluster. But soon, those words became a shocking announcement. McGregor was eyeing Ireland's presidency. As his fight career slowed, McGregor turned his gaze outward. He was no longer the hungry kid chasing belts. He was a global brand. Proper number. 12 expanded, endorsements flowed, and his wealth soared. But Conor wasn't content with being a retired fighter sipping whiskey in mansion. He wanted relevance, power, and perhaps redemption. His social media shifted from training clips to social commentary. He began blasting Ireland's politicians for failing on homelessness, housing, and crime. He spoke of his Dublin roots, presenting himself as the voice of the working class. To his supporters, it felt authentic. He wasn't some career politician with scripted speeches. He was Conor from Crumlin, a man who fought his way up and now wanted to fight for his country. To critics, it was dangerous posturing from a volatile celebrity chasing headlines. By 2024, the speculation turned real. McGregor announced he was exploring a presidential run. Many laughed until he doubled down, reaching out to councils for nomination and floating radical ideas about immigration, security, and direct democracy. Then came endorsements, even Elon Musk voicing support. Suddenly, President McGregor wasn't just a meme, it was a conversation. For McGregor, it wasn't just politics, it was legacy. He'd conquered the UFC, crossed into boxing with Mayweather, and built an empire. Now he wanted history. But the political arena was unlike anything he'd faced. No knockout punches, no first-round finishes, just scrutiny, skepticism, and a nation deciding if the Notorious could ever be trusted with more than a fight. In early 2025, Conor McGregor shocked the political world with an announcement that felt more like a plot twist than a campaign speech. He was running for President of Ireland. Standing in a sharp suit outside Dublin's government buildings, with cameras flashing and microphones crowding his face, the Notorious declared that his next fight wouldn't be in an octagon or a boxing ring, but at the ballot box. For many, it seemed like the ultimate McGregor move. Audacious, theatrical, impossible to ignore. But for Conor, it wasn't a stunt. He framed his campaign as a mission. He spoke about issues that had been boiling over in Ireland: a housing crisis leaving families in the streets, immigration debates fueling division, and a government he accused of being out of touch with ordinary people. In his fiery style, McGregor declared he would be the candidate of direct democracy. He promised that under his presidency, he would veto bills unless they were put to public referendum. He painted himself not as a politician, but as the voice of the people, a straight talker, unafraid to call out corruption or incompetence. The declaration sent shockwaves through Ireland. For supporters, it was inspiring. Here was a man who had gone from welfare checks to global superstardom, promising to take on the political elite with the same ferocity he once used against UFC champions. To critics, it was terrifying. They argued McGregor was reckless, that his temper, his criminal record, and his erratic public behavior made him unfit for office. Was Ireland really ready for a fighter-turned-politician with no experience in governance? Still, McGregor's campaign launch achieved what few politicians could: attention. His videos went viral, his speeches dominated headlines, and suddenly, people who had never cared about Irish presidential politics were talking about it on podcasts and TikTok clips worldwide. McGregor wasn't just entering a race, he was rewriting its rules. But ambition is one thing, reality is another. And in Ireland, getting your name on the ballot isn't as simple as announcing you're running. It requires navigating a system that, as McGregor would soon discover, wasn't built for outsiders. Ireland's presidential election isn't like the UFC, where a fighter can talk his way into a main event. To even appear on the ballot, candidates must secure nominations, either from at least 20 members of the Oireachtas, Ireland's parliament, or from at least 4 local councils. For McGregor, this was the first real test of his political campaign. Almost immediately, he ran into roadblocks. The established political parties closed ranks, dismissing him as a distraction. Councillors balked at the idea of endorsing a man with such a turbulent history. The Tannaist, Simon Harris, said bluntly that McGregor had a negligible chance of securing nomination. The odds in betting markets reflected the sentiment. Bookies placed him at 100 to 1, suggesting he had almost no path forward. But if there's one thing McGregor has built a career on, it's defying odds. He took his frustration public, blasting the nomination system as elitist and anti-democratic. Why, he asked, should the voice of 20 politicians matter more than the voice of the Irish people? He launched an online petition to prove his popularity, quickly amassing tens of thousands of signatures. He began traveling to councils, demanding that they give him the same shot as career politicians. The media swirled with debates. Was McGregor exposing a flaw in the system, or just trying to bulldoze his way through rules that applied to everyone else? Supporters rallied behind his message of breaking down barriers. Detractors mocked him, saying he was treating politics like another fight promotion. What made the moment compelling wasn't whether McGregor would succeed. It was that he had turned a dry procedural process into a spectacle. For weeks, every headline was about whether or not the Notorious could land his nomination. The world was watching Ireland's political system like it was a title fight. But if politics was a game of obstacles, McGregor wasn't facing it alone. In the most surprising twist of the campaign, a billionaire stepped into his corner, and suddenly, the fight for credibility got much louder. When news broke that Elon Musk had publicly endorsed Conor McGregor's presidential run, the entire campaign shifted gears. On his platform, X, formerly Twitter, Musk called McGregor a fighter for the people and hinted at financial and media backing. Overnight, McGregor's campaign stopped being just an Irish curiosity. It became international news. For McGregor, the endorsement was a lifeline. He had been struggling against a political establishment that dismissed him as a sideshow, but Musk's support brought validation and controversy. Suddenly, headlines weren't just about McGregor's past or his nomination hurdles. They were about a global tech billionaire throwing his weight into Irish politics. Some praised Musk for supporting an outsider, while others accused him of meddling in a sovereign nation's affairs. The alliance raised eyebrows even further when former U.S. President Donald Trump, a man McGregor had publicly admired in the past, also voiced his approval. Suddenly, McGregor wasn't just Ireland's wildcard candidate, he was part of a strange, global political current that blended celebrity, populism, and spectacle. Critics were horrified, arguing Ireland's presidency risked being turned into reality television. Supporters saw it as proof that McGregor had the power to disrupt not just sports, but politics on a world stage. The Irish government, meanwhile, stayed firm. Endorsements from billionaires didn't change the rule. McGregor still needed nomination, and no amount of international attention could substitute for signatures from councils and parliament members. Yet, the mere fact that Elon Musk and Donald Trump were now talking about Irish politics because of McGregor proved something. He had already changed the game. This was the paradox of McGregor's run. Even if he never made the ballot, his campaign had forced conversations that politicians could no longer avoid. He was pulling focus to issues ordinary voters cared about. He was putting Ireland's presidency in global headlines. And most of all, he was proving once again that underestimating him was dangerous. But the closer he pushed toward the ballot, the louder the question question grew. Was McGregor truly a leader in the making, or just the best self-promoter Ireland had ever seen? For all the noise, attention, and international endorsements, Conor McGregor's presidential campaign soon collided with something far more daunting than any opponent he had faced in the Octagon: political reality. In combat sports, McGregor had mastered the art of self-promotion. He could talk himself into fights, generate hype with a single press conference, and make entire arenas bend to his energy. But politics, especially Irish politics, was less forgiving. No matter how many signatures his online petition gathered, or how many likes his campaign videos racked up, the hard truth remained. Without the formal nominations from councillors or parliament members, he wasn't getting on the ballot. This was a fact his critics hammered relentlessly. Established parties painted him as unserious, a sideshow who would embarrass the office of the presidency. Headlines highlighted his criminal record, the bar fights, the lawsuits, the allegations of misconduct. His opponents argued that Ireland's highest office demanded dignity, stability, and moral authority, qualities they claimed McGregor lacked. But if they thought those attacks would quiet him, they were mistaken. McGregor doubled down, using their resistance as fuel. He positioned himself as the outsider, battling a corrupt system that feared his popularity. He claimed the establishment was rigged to keep working-class voices out of politics. Every time a councillor refused to back him, he spun it as proof that the elite were terrified of change. Still, the controversy deepened when his rhetoric escalated. McGregor began hammering on immigration, crime, and corruption with language that critics labeled divisive and dangerous. He warned of imported criminal and blasted the government for failing its people. To supporters, it was raw truth-telling. Finally, someone willing to say what politicians avoided. To detractors, it was a slide into populism that risked inflaming tensions in an already divided Europe. The paradox of McGregor's candidacy became glaring. He was simultaneously Ireland's most popular and most polarizing figure. Crowds gathered to cheer him, but protests formed just as quickly to denounce him. For every fan who believed he could shake up a stagnant system, there was another citizen horrified at the thought of President McGregor. And yet, isn't that what defined his career from the beginning? From the UFC to the whiskey business, McGregor had always thrived on being underestimated. Political reality was proving harder than any opponent, but he had forced his way into the conversation. Whether Ireland liked it or not, Conor McGregor had made himself impossible to ignore. By this stage of the campaign, a larger question loomed over Ireland and the global media. Was Conor McGregor's presidential run a serious bid for leadership, or just another chapter in his long history of spectacle? On one hand, his legacy in sports was secure. No matter what happened in politics, he was the first fighter in UFC history to hold two belts simultaneously. He headlined the biggest pay-per-views, fought Floyd Mayweather in one of the richest events in combat sports, and carried Irish flags into arenas across the world. His whiskey brand, Proper Number 12, had turned him from fighter to entrepreneur, making him a nine-figure celebrity. He had already lived the kind of life most could only dream of. But McGregor's legacy had always been complicated. For every highlight reel knockout, there was a scandal waiting to tarnish it. For every business triumph, there was a legal headline about a fight in a pub, an accusation in a courtroom, or a reckless outburst caught on video. His presidential campaign only amplified this duality. To some, it was the natural evolution of a fighter who never settled for less than global dominance. To others, it was a distraction, a vanity project that threatened to drag Ireland's presidency into the circus of celebrity politics. Still, the very fact that people debated it so fiercely spoke volumes. Few athletes could cross into politics with even a shred of credibility. But McGregor wasn't just any athlete. His charisma, his confidence, and his global platform gave him a reach most politicians could never dream of. Even if he failed to secure a ballot spot, even if he never came close to winning, he had forced Irish citizens to reckon with the idea. What if the most notorious man in sports really could lead a country? And maybe that was the point. McGregor's presidential run wasn't only about winning, it was about rewriting how legacy is defined. Would he be remembered as Ireland's greatest fighter who tried and failed to enter politics? Or as the man who, against all odds, reshaped what it meant to be a candidate in the modern age? Legacy is rarely about perfection. It's about impact, and win or lose, McGregor had already left his mark on Ireland's political stage, the same way he once left his mark on the UFC. As election season loomed closer, the question of McGregor's future became the ultimate cliffhanger. Would he make the ballot? Could he rally enough councils, bend the system, and force his way into the race? Or would his campaign fade as just another chapter in the long, chaotic story of the Notorious? Regardless of the outcome, McGregor had already achieved something extraordinary. He had blurred the line between celebrity and statesman, between spectacle and substance. He had turned the Irish presidential race, normally a quiet, formal affair, into a global headline. For weeks, Ireland wasn't just on the sports pages, it was on the front pages, debated in parliaments, podcasts, and pubs alike. If he did find a way to secure nomination, nation, the next round would be brutal. Every speech would be dissected, every scandal resurfaced, every promise scrutinized. If he failed, his supporters would call it proof of corruption, while critics would sigh in relief. But either way, McGregor had already shifted the ground beneath Irish politics. And what of his personal story? Perhaps that's the most compelling part. Conor McGregor rose from Dublin council estates to UFC immortality. He went from collecting welfare to selling whiskey empires. He built himself into one of the most famous athletes alive, and then set his sights on the presidency of a nation. Whether you call it madness or genius, arrogance or ambition, it is undeniably McGregor. The next round isn't about knockouts or belts, it's about history. If McGregor finds a way onto the ballot, Ireland will face a decision unlike any in its history. If he doesn't, the shockwaves of his campaign will linger. A reminder that in the age of celebrity and spectacle, even the presidency isn't immune to disruption. So, what's next for Conor McGregor? A seat in Arras and Octagon? A return to the Octagon? Or simply the satisfaction of proving once again that he can make the world watch, even when the fight has changed? One thing is certain. Love him or hate him, Conor McGregor has never been easier or harder to ignore.